Hey guys, how we doing? This is BeGood. Welcome to a brand new series, a Realm of Mad God Exalt guide. So right off the bat, this series will be done by my alt account, Fatlip, so I can best show you the progress of an account starting from the ground up. This account, I have not done anything. I did start making a wizard, but then paused halfway through and stopped and deleted it. So we will be starting from the ground up. So when you load in, you'll be prompted to create a new character. And right off the bat, you will have to choose between seasonal or non-seasonal. So what exactly does this mean? So to get technical and take a look at the Romai page, seasonal characters are characters participating in a season. There are rules applied for all seasons. So seasonal characters start from scratch every season. What this means is that you go with a completely separate vault. You can only trade with seasonal characters. However, you can still use the pets from your regular non-seasonal characters. You have a permanent 10% base XP bonus, 10% higher chance for enchantable items. We'll get into enchantments later. Seasonal characters get access to missions each season. We're going to delve into that in a moment. And the following things happen when a season ends. All seasonal characters are converted into original character or into regular characters. All items in the vault, gift vault, potion storage are transferred into the seasonal spoils chest in the regular vault. All seasonal vault expanders used are applied to the regular vault. This does not apply to the potion storage expanders. Blueprint progress is reset for seasonal characters. So, whenever you make a seasonal character, it's going to be outlined in blue like this, whereas a non-seasonal is going to be regular. And again, as shown in there, a seasonal character can only be created with an empty character slot. You won't be able to use an existing character. In order to make your new character a seasonal, you can toggle the seasonal function in the character overview menu. So we'll cut back over to here, and as you can see, we have a whole bunch of characters that are locked, and the only one that we have available is the wizard. So we are going to run him seasonal, and we're going to do play. And traditionally this would throw you into the tutorial, but it did not for me because I already ran the tutorial. So if you need to run the tutorial, you do /tutorial, and this takes you into the tutorial. So when you load into the tutorial, the first thing that it's going to get into is your controls. So we are going to take a look at the controls. This is what I have my controls set to. We'll scan through it real quick and then we will dive into it. There are some things that I do not have bound, but most of this stuff is standard, and a few of the things I have changed. So something that is very important, guys, is screen rotation. I believe traditionally these are set to Q and E. I've changed mine to space and left shift. I was advised this by a friend because it makes it a lot more fluid whenever you're screen rotating and moving around. Your fingers are already near those keys, your pinky and your thumb, and it makes it a lot easier to just hit those buttons without needing to get off of WASD. Another thing that is important to remember is toggling the center of the player. Mine is set to X, and reset the default camera angle, which is Z. These are very important. So with the toggling of the center player, what this does is when we hit X, we are no longer at the center. When we hit X again, it is toggled centrally on us. So what this does is it gives you a little more view of what's ahead, and then jump back and there's not as much. Z, so when you're screen rotating and you're not sure which way was the way, you hit Z and boom, sets you back to your standard. Now, as far as the default camera angle goes, I have mine set to 45 degrees. Some people set it to 0 so that you go back to this. The reason why I like mine at 45 degrees is because it makes it a little bit easier to dodge whenever you're at an angle for some bosses. So I set mine to 45 degree. So the thing that I want you to work on when going through here is keeping your screen oriented straight. whenever you're going through a passageway. So we're just going to work on our screen rotation. And again, using that left shift and space, we're just going to goof around. And so we need to rotate our screen so that we can see the text. So we're going to jump, hitting our X, and now we can see far down there. We rotate over, and we can see far down there. And so we're going to reorient it back on us, hitting X again. Z will set it back to that 45 degree, and then we'll screen rotate nice and straight. Come right on through. And then in here, we've got our HP and our MP. And again, this is a permadeath game, so if you hit 0, you're dead. So always remember that you can Nexus. Our hotkey for Nexus is the tab. We cannot Nexus right now because we're in the tutorial. So here is a good opportunity to just work on dodging. You got some shots, so just want to move back and forth. Do your best to get in between them. Okay, this is a good opportunity to work on your dodging and screen rotation at the same time. So go ahead and let it shoot at you. Again, work on dodging in here for a little bit. This is a good room to get comfortable with screen rotation and dodging. And so once you're kind of feeling more comfortable with the moving around and everything, we'll go ahead and move along. And we're going to go ahead and hit our auto fire button, which we have set to I. That way we don't have to hold down or shoot, and we can just focus on aiming with our cursor. So we got some chickens. Do a little bit of screen rotation here. And we're going to take on the evil chicken god. And so our ability we have set to this center mouse button. And so we're just going to aim it on them and shoot and rotate. And so I'm going to keep on. It gives you a nice little tier 0 defense ring. A whopping 1 defense. Better than nothing. And so, the first ever dungeon that you go into is Ors Kitchen. And so, here we're going to utilize our spell blast for these walls. Train it on there. And then go ahead and start some screen rotation. And really work on your dodging and rotating here, guys. Really keep yourself centered on the enemies. Pick up your loot. You can store your HP here and your MP there, or vice versa by just swapping it over. Okay. And if you need to use these, remember our hotkeys for our HP and MP. And then let's see, quick slot 2 is V. So quick slot 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and then when you put a utility belt on, it will give you 3. So F uses 1, V uses 2. And again, working on our screen rotation and dodging. And as you can see, as we're killing enemies, we're getting that XP and leveling up. We're going to come through here real quick. And always remember that you have your ability. Spell blast that wall. And in here we're going to get some MP pots and some HP pots and a nice tier 1 staff. And so we'll drag that in there and move on. Doing some more spell blasting. And pretty soon we're going to come up on bone grind, but again, we just want to work on just little screen rotations and dodging. Some spell bombs. We got that, and we'll collect the rest of these. And again, just more screen rotating and dodging. Pick that up. And remember, V does our quick slot 2 and refills our MP. And so we'll come in here, orient ourselves with the boss, work on these. If a boss has minions, it's always a good idea to kind of clear the minions out first. Then you can do that by kind of provoking them and then walking away. And then we're just going to shoot, spell bomb, shoot, spell bomb, rotate. Again, if we need to hide from damage, we can hide over here. Collect some HP, go back, spell bomb, more spell bombs, and look at that. He's dead. And with that, we get a ring, an XP, and we are up to level 3. So onward we go. You have defeated your first minion of Ors. This portal leads to the Nexus. You are safe there. The Nexus Hub contains many features. These features and many more are explained in the journal. So, the journal is a nice little page-by-page detailed guide of, not too detailed, but a loose guide of kind of what's going on. And we will go through all of these more in more detail in other videos, but it's always a good idea if you have any quick questions to come through here and just take a look. You know, it's got pets, the vault, Oryx, all this stuff. So always remember that you've got your journal in there. Okay, that journal can give you quick information. If you don't want to click out and jump to realm line, you can always jump in your journal. So through here, and we load into Nexus. And so after that, you're basically ready to go into the realm. You know, you're not going to really dive into anything too heavy yet, and we aren't either, but if you proceed through, you have your realms here, and then you come through here, and you have all of your servers. US East is almost always full, especially towards the evening, it fills up. US East 2 is a good alternative. EU West, they also pop keys. US East and EU West are good for key popping. If you're looking to get a bunch of pots and max your characters out, US East can be a good dungeon for that, but we're going to play it safe and just sit on US East 2. And so before we head into the realms and start taking on bosses and everything, there are a few things that we need to understand first. So one thing that I want to get into are status effects and debuffs. So with status effects, we have two kinds of status effects, positive and negative. Positive include armored, berserk, damaging, energized, healing, immune, inspired, invisible, invincible, invulnerable, purify, speedy, and overall stat increases. Among the negative, we have armor break, bleeding, blind, confused, curse, darkness, dazed, drought, drunk, exposed, hallucinating, hexed, paralyzed, pet stasis, petrify, quiet, sick, silent, slow, stasis, stat reduction, stunned, unstable, and weak. And so right off the bat, a lot of that may seem like a lot, so we are just going to go through each one of them slowly, the positive and the negative, and see specifically how they affect you, how they affect the enemy, and what to do when they happen. So the first that we have is armor breaking. For both the player and enemy, armor increases defense by 50% during damage calculations, and it is negated by armor breaking, so you're going to want to avoid armor breaking shots. Next is berserk. For the player, berserk increases attack speed by 25%, but not the dex stat. It is negated by dazed. For the enemy, it signifies an offensive boost, so this means that you're going to want to stand back a little bit. For damaging, the player increased damage from weapons by 25%. This is negated by weak. And for enemies, it signifies an enemy's attack will be armor piercing. So again, you're going to want to get back when you see them going into this damaging phase. Those armor piercing shots can do a lot of damage. Energize, for the player, white floating pixels will appear around the player and increase the mana regen by 10 MP per second. For the enemy, this can signify that the enemy has been empowered somehow. For healing, players' white pixels float up around the player and increase the HP regeneration by 20 HP per second. This is negated by sick. Immune. With immune, this applies to the enemies and is signified with a shield and a different icon depending on which negative effect they are immune to. These icons will look like this. For inspired, the player weapon range is increased by 1.25 its current range. For the enemies, it has no actual effect. It gives the enemy projectiles it gives the enemy's projectiles the illusion of the effect. So it may look like they've been inspired, but it's not actually doing anything to the enemy. For invisible, the player becomes translucent but can still take damage. Quiet will instantly dispel the invisibility. So when you're rushing through the Godlands, if a sprite god shoots a quieting shot, you will instantly become visible. For invincibility, you gain 3 seconds of invincibility when you teleport to a player, as well as stunned and silenced. So, when teleporting to the Godlands or boss rooms, know that when your player opens fire, your 3 seconds are up, and that you need to be expecting to take damage. If you teleport to a horde of mobs in the Godlands, use that 3 seconds to back out and get to safety. If you cannot, then Nexus. Alright, it is never worth trying to get to safety and dying. For invulnerability with the player, you are safe from attacks but not status effect shots. For enemies, most enemies go invulnerable in between phases, so this can signify that they are moving on to their next phase. For Purify, it dispels all negative status effects from the player except for pet stasis. For Speedy, for the player, it increases movement speed by 50%, not the speed stat, and it is negated by slow. For enemies, the enemy has increased movement speed. If you are with a class with 50 speed, you want to be careful because you can often be overrun by the boss. Anything higher than about 55 speed, you're in the safe zone. For overall stat increases, it provides temporary stat increases to whichever stat the consumable applies to. So those are all the positive status effects and how they affect both the player and enemy, and now we are going to get into the negative ones. The first one is Armor Break. This reduces the affected entity's defense stat to 0 during damage calculations. The damage numbers for the armor break shots will appear in purple, not red. For bleeding, for the player, it drains HP by 20 per second, and it stops your HP regeneration via VIT, but cannot kill the player, so you cannot die from bleeding out. For the enemies, it has the same effect of the 20 HP per second. For blind, it heavily darkens the player's screen. If the screen is too dark, you can adjust your screen brightness to help with this. For confused, for the player, it swaps the controls from left to down and down to left, right to up, and up to down. As far as the key goes, that's W to D and D to W, A to S, and S to A. It swaps your screen rotation keys, so again, you gotta be careful with that. With the enemies, it signifies that the enemy's AI has been disrupted. For Cursed, the affected targets receive 25% more damage, which is calculated after defense and defense modifiers. For Darkness, visibility is decreased to a small area around the player and enemies no longer displayed as red dots on your minimaps. For Dazed, the players, it reduces players' dex to 0 during fire calculations. For the enemies, it halves the number of projectiles fired per attack. For Drought, it disables all consumable items and prevents them from being consumed. This includes HP pots and can even go as far as blueprints, so if you have the Drought effect and you've got anything that can be consumed, you're going to want to wait or go ahead and Nexus and then consume it. For Drunk, it blurs or warps your screen depending on your settings. Exposed, it reduces your defense by 20 during damage calculations. Your damage can go below 0, resulting in more damage per shot. For Hallucinating and Hexed, it changes the items and enemies on your screen to random sprites. For Paralyzed, it renders you immobile, pinning you in place. For Pet Stasis, it turns your pet into a chicken, rendering it useless for a little bit. Petrify, it turns you to stone, disabling movement and shooting. However, you do take 10% less damage per shot from all attacks. With Quiet, it drains your mana and stops your mana regen via Wiz. Nexusing, however, will restore your mana. When you're sick, it stops natural HP regen by VIT. Silence prevents you from using your ability. This does not deplete your MP though, like the Quiet status effect. For Slowed, the player, it reduces speed to 0 during movement calculations, resulting in a speed of 4 tiles per second. It does nullify the effects of Speedy. For the enemy, it reduces movement speed by 50% as well. For Stasis, affected enemies turn to gray and cannot move or attack or be hit or damaged. And all enemies who have been stasis and come out of the stasising will be invulnerable to stasis for 3 seconds. And stat reduction, this reduces whichever stat it's affecting. Stunned, for the player, it cannot use their weapon, but they can use their ability. And for the enemies, they cannot fire bullets at all. For unstable, weapons gain random shot deviation when aiming, lowering your accuracy. And for weakness, for the player, it reduces attack to 0 during damage calculations. And for the enemy, it reduces damage of all attacks by 10%. That will be it for the status effects. Next, we will talk about equipment in tiered versus untiered. Tiered items have a number assigned to them that indicates how strong they are. Weapons run from tier 0 to tier 14, and the abilities run tier 0 to tier 7. Untiered items are special items that break from standard tier progression. Set tier items are 4 items designed to be used together. When used in conjunction on appropriate class, will change the player's skin into a 16 by 16 sprite and give additional stat bonuses. So as seen, as the tiers climb, so does the power. Higher tiered abilities will also give stat bonuses. There are reskinned items as well, as you can see here. The last thing that we will discuss is Soulbound. This is very important to understand when we start out, as you will spend more time learning boss fights, shot patterns, phases, and overall just trying to survive until you have mastered your controls and the lower level dungeons. So as far as Soulbound Damage goes, we don't actually have a number on what Soulbound Damage is, but there's a lot of speculation. Here is what we do know. You don't actually need to do a lot of damage to get in that range for Soulbound loot. If you're alone, don't get into a dungeon you know for sure you aren't ready for. When in the dungeon, with large crowds or doing events in a realm, know that 5 or 10 direct hits on the boss with your weapon, not the ability, should put you in the range for Soulbound loot. Now, if you're on a wand or staff class, you may need to do around 10 to 15. This may seem like a lot, but in all honesty, when you get down to it with the rate of fire on your weapon, it's going to help you out to achieve those shots within probably 2 to 3 seconds and running into the boss 2 or 3 times. And then after that, you can go ahead and back out and focus on dodging and just surviving until everybody else kills the boss. So guys, with all this in mind, just remember, patience is key, screen rotation is key. Never be afraid to Nexus, and always, when going into realms or dungeons, try and have your quick slots filled up with HP and MP pots, as well as keeping some HP and MP pots in your inventory as well. If you do have a backpack on your character, it's a good idea to maybe keep your backpack filled up with spare HP pots. Something to try and keep in mind when it comes to nexusing is try and decide a certain point on your health bar that if you see your health drop below, you automatically nexus. So this could literally be just a line that it lines up with a certain letter on your screen where the HP bar is. And like I said, as soon as you see your health start to get below that spot, you instantly hit that nexus button. Alright? This will save you from many potential deaths and close calls. You might miss out on some loot, but the good thing is, if you don't die, you can always turn around and retry it again. But if you die, you cannot go back and retry it with the same character at least. And it's going to take you a lot much longer to rebuild that character when it dies. Alrighty guys, so with all that in mind, we are ready to run the realm and achieve level 20. That is where this video is going to end, and in part 2 we will work on achieving level 20 as well as going over the sections of the realms and certain dungeons. Thank you for watching, and if you have any questions, be sure to comment it below. Keep an eye out for me in USEast guys, and I will see you in the next video.